people whose long-term relationship faded. What was the final straw that made you realize it was time to call it a day? My first relationship happened when I was still in university. I moved in within a few months before we both graduated. We started working right after graduation, but our jobs had a total different schedule. Mine was during the day, his was in the evening and often in the weekend. We really spent time together and I guess we drifted apart. Then I got the opportunity to go to work in another country and he told me to go for it. We still message each other a few times a year, but that's it. After 2 years, she went on a trip. When I picked her up from the airport, she said how much she missed me and I realized I really didn't. I dated a girl for a bit. She came back from visiting family and she made a comment saying I didn't miss you as much as I thought I would. I responded with a sigh of relief as I was planning on breaking up with her. I had a girl break up with me while on a vacation, not because something happened, but simply because midway through, she thought she'd feel more elated going on vacation with a boyfriend for the first time. So obviously I wasn't the one. I was hurt, but I decided to be mature about it, make the most out of the vacation anyways. The way I handled it proved to be a big turn on for her. Maybe I could be the one because her Prince Charming would always be understanding and empathetic and cool-headed even when upset. When we came home, she told me she'd made a terrible mistake and obviously her judgment had been wrong. She insisted on paying for me to take another vacation with her because she felt terrible for ruining mine. It was a classy thing to do. She broke up with me again a few months later because this time she was sure I wasn't the one. I realized I dodged a major bullet. We remained friends and she found and found the one about 8 times in 6-7 years. I got to a point where every day I was alone, I'd be rehearsing ways to say I want to break up and couldn't bring myself to do it when he got home. At some point I realized that wasn't normal and for his sake I should just end it before it goes too far. That was a 4-year relationship. Same. I would stay late at work or study in the library after class, partly because I didn't want to go home and be around my ex. I dreamed about going somewhere else. I knew I'd get home to dirty dishes, laundry on the floor and no food ready to eat, and I'd be expected to do all that while he sat on the couch. And that right after I finished doing all the chores, and I'd be tired and just wanting to relax. That's when he'd want sex and probably berate me for not being in the mood. Cleaning up after him was a turn off, but he still rarely bothered to do his fair share after the first year. I realized I was taking after my mom, and I didn't want that. I left, and now I've got half the cooking and cleaning to do, and I enjoy my time at home. Holy shit, that's pretty much how it went down for me too. I guess his mother took care of most things for him, and once he was left to his own devices, that meant leftover food rotting on the counter next to the overflowing sink, trash thrown around the trash can because that was overflowing too, shit stains all over the toilet, no clean towels or sheets for weeks because he was too busy getting cross-faded every day to even do laundry. Even though there were plenty of things I enjoyed about our relationship, that doesn't outweigh the horror I felt at the thought of being a maid or cook for the rest of my life. Sorry, kind of venting here. My mom took care of most things for me as well, but when my future and current wife and I moved out together, I wanted to do the things you listed because they made me feel like an adult. Now 10 years later, nothing has changed. My wife isn't a great cook, so I tend to cook all the meals and she helps me clean up afterward. One of us does the laundry. Cool. We help the other one fold and put it away. Whoever gets home first does the daily chores, cleans the litter boxes, vacuums, etc. Whoever gets up first does the morning routine. She's working on the weekend. I go grocery shopping and make sure the place is nice when she gets home. I can't imagine being in a relationship with someone who can't do the most basic adult shit. Somewhere between giving up on small talk and not looking forward to the weekends anymore. I just moved out of our house 2 weeks ago and I've had a lot of time to reflect. Tell me about those reflections. Going through my own. I am moving out and we are not staying in the same place because the fighting will get too miserable, if not violent. I am enjoying my time alone. I am realizing that this man values so many other things before he ever valued me. He values his comfort before he values examining why he is miserable. He values his state of mind before he values learning to examine the progression of negative thinking that got him there. He values his ability to drink and get drunk rather than my comfort or need to be sober. He values himself and his way of life before my comfort, my pleasure, or my mental well-being. I am a person who wants to thrive and grow and never stop learning. I want to feel safe and at home in my own mind and my own body and in my home. I want to be powerful and influential in my community, and I was not getting that support from him. I was also suffocating because he valued his comfort above all else. I really don't want that in my life. I want peace and fulfillment and happiness. He wasn't giving me any of that. I have very little self-worth. worth, and it was being shown to me in this relationship. The lack of boundaries, respect, lack of communication, and unwillingness to work on oneself really drove that home to me. I deserve a lot better than someone who puts me down when I go to them with my emotions, or someone who gets defensive immediately when I tell them about my concerns. I always try to be gentle and create a safe place to express those feelings even when emotions were high. Granted, I made mistakes fueled by emotion, but my intentions to create safety and communication were always there. When I slipped up and my own toxic traits came out, I knew I was losing myself. I try really hard to stay self-reflective and find a partner who will help me walk through those feelings and those actions. Even if I slip up, what is life about if not trying? He didn't understand that, and he will never ever understand that. It was time to let go. The relationship was toxic from the beginning, but we had a kid and leaving would be a big sacrifice. So I told her that we're going to take 10 months to really focus on improving our relationship. And if we can't agree after that time that even one thing has gotten better between us, I am leaving. I really worked hard during that time to do relationship work with her. But every time I brought it up, she said all our problems were my fault, so there was nothing for her to do. We were in the exact same place at the end of the 10 months, and I started working on my exit plan. Was she surprised that you follow through on leaving? Yes, she was. When I reiterated that I had said exactly what I was going to do, she claimed she was too distracted to really process what I was saying. That lady has an excuse for everything. My now ex-husband did some contract work for the facility I work at. My co-worker from a different department complimented on how busy I was and how the hospital was lucky to have me because I did great work. He said to this person, "Well, I don't know how busy she's cause she's always bugging me. You guys know how it is." It crushed me and made me realize how little he thought of me. After 17 plus years, and she no longer wanted to put in the effort and would rather spend her time on social media talking with everyone but me and ignoring our obvious issues. So after I finally had enough and took her phone out of her hands and forced a face-to-face, sit-down chat of airing the issues, in the end it was worth it, and never realized how much of a prisoner I felt like in my own home until I had my own life again. Lesson learned: if you ever feel like your partner has checked out mentally, they likely haven't. Don't put up with the bullshit for the next couple years just because you have a long history together. I promise you, it will only keep you miserable. We lived together but lived completely separate lives. Basically a housemate I shared a bed with. Happened twice to me so far. Similar situation. I was with someone for a few years, but it took a while to occur to us that we really didn't fancy each other at all and were happy to be just friends and housemates. So happy to be just friends that when I bought a flat and moved out, he came with me, but to live in separate rooms and have our own lives while sharing custody of our cats. It worked fine, as there was no romantic or sexual aspect to any of it. Even when we finally went our separate ways, it just happened naturally and calmly. He's a lovely bloke and now happily married with 2 kids. And to prove how horribly amicable it all was, I was his best woman at his wedding. Honestly, it was the pandemic. It really forced us to actually spend time together, and I realized we kind of just didn't do much together at all. I had spent years thinking it was cool that we kept our own friends and space, but once those distractions were taken away, it was just really clear to me that we were more roommates than a couple. There's a saying in Chinese that translates as follows: marriage is the process by which love transforms into kinship. I don't necessarily believe that that is always true. Fulfilling long-term relationships often have both romantic love and kinship, but by the same token, I also think it's important to have individual friends pursuits. The goal should be to celebrate mutual differences and let them enrich both your lives. I knew it was over when I cared more about his well-being than he cared about his own well-being. I would have moved mountains for him if it made his life easier, and he just continuously put himself in shitty situations. I eventually just gave up. I can't be with someone who doesn't care about themselves. Thank God that's over. Together for 5 years and long distance for 2 of them. I realized one day it felt like just going through the motions when she answered the Skype call. I could see it in her eyes too. We got to a point where we spent more time muted on calls so we could do other things, like she was more interested in reading and I was more interested in hoping on chat on game with friends. We would sit in silence with our webcams on and barely look at each other. The flame just went out. I eventually just had to sit down and really evaluate some stuff. It was a really hard conversation and absolutely broke my heart to tell her. We cried together and had the best conversation we had in over a year. I went into the relationship knowing that she liked to drink, and she went into the relationship knowing that I didn't drink any longer, but we really liked each other and wanted to make it work. But when she would drink, she would get angry at me for not drinking, like I was judging her or lording it over her, which looking back after years away may have been true. Maybe I was and just didn't realize it, but she would get drunk and black out. I would clean her up and tuck her in and then go home. Near the end, when this would happen, I would call the next day to check up on her, and the first thing she'd say was, "Are you calling to break up with me?" And the answer was always no, of course not, until the day I just had to say, yeah, I think maybe so. It was LDR for 2 years and his family moved to another country about halfway through the relationship. I was a college freshman and realized that there was little to no chance of us seeing each other anytime soon. And who knew if we'd still be in person compatible after who knows how much longer. I broke it off after the school year ended. 10 plus years ago, I dated a guy for 3 years. We even got engaged. I was only 18 and later found out that my mom bought the ring for him to give to me. He was extremely charming. By all accounts, he was a great guy, would go out of his way to do nice things for people, always sweet to me. My parents, especially my mom, loved him. He started lying about things that were really important to me. I was looking for a job. He said he put in a good word for me with the owner of this one jewelry store. I went there to talk to the owner and pick up an application. Store owner proceeds to tell me that my fiance made no mention of me, didn't put his good word in for me like he said. Another example, we had planned to go to a concert in another state. Several of my favorite bands were playing. He said he had bought the tickets and they were at will call. I drive us the 2+ hours to get there, only to find out that there were no tickets in his name or mine at will call. The show was sold out. He made all sorts of excuses, saying that the vendor must have messed up. Maybe they did, but he had lied too often to me at this point for me to believe him. Hopped right back in the car and I drive the 2+ hours back in the rain while sobbing. I think the true last straw was when he lied about having brain cancer. Here's the thing, he went to the hospital pretty often and it was always coincidentally right after we had a big fight. The last time though, I didn't drop everything to go see him at the hospital. All of his friends and my mom thought I was an asshole. Yeah, I probably was for thinking he was lying about brain cancer when I didn't know for sure, but it's hard to believe a chronic liar about anything. I found out later from my mom, surprised that he didn't have cancer. He also refused to give me space after we broke up, constantly texting, calling, and coming to my house. My mom let him in the house once. I didn't want to speak to him, told him that as well as my mom, and locked myself in my room. My mom proceeded to tell him where the key for the lock was despite my protesting, and he unlocked my bedroom doors so that we could talk. Looking back, it seems pretty harmless, I guess. Maybe I overreacted. I wanted no contact from him though, and he didn't respect that boundary, and it felt like an invasion of my safe space. After we broke up, my mom stayed in contact with him for several years. She always took his side over mine. She refused to meet any of the guys I dated for 6 years after we broke up. I ended up moving out at 19 because of how strained my relationship with my mom became after the breakup. She even bought him things, like a plane ticket. My mom and I have since talked things out, and she admits to being manipulated by him. She has met my current SO and likes him but doesn't cross boundaries like she did with my ex-fiancé. I am still with my husband, but I can feel myself getting more and more frustrated with the relationship. I want more than he can offer me, and I don't mean that I only want him for what he can provide me. I bring in 70% of our income. I pay 80% of bills and mortgage. I do most of the housework, lawn care, house maintenance, everything really. I wouldn't mind doing all of that if I felt valued and appreciated. I get 1 full day to be with him, and he opted to have a D&D session from 2 to 10 p.m. I constantly hear him say he wants to spend more time with me, and he'll call into work, spend maybe 45 minutes with me, then go play games or do something else. I address issues and he'll change the behavior for a couple days and then go back to it. I didn't marry him to have a part-time spouse. He's a very sweet person, and that's what I love about him, but I just don't feel that peace I used to feel in my soul when in the same room as him. He was in the wrong to begin with. He accepted it. I never pointed it out. I just chose to get trampled on instead. He asked to give him some time to fix himself so that he can treat me better. I agreed. 6 months later, he finds an excuse. A screenshot sent by his friend that on Instagram I tagged another friend of mine on a post who happened to a male. All heck broke loose. I ended up as a person with no morals. While fighting to save our relationship, I realized he never came here with the intention to continue. Our pause turned into an indefinite definite break for him. The moment it hit me that he's using this pathetic excuse to break himself free of me, I let him go. I asked him twice to confirm if breaking up is his final decision. He said yes and I followed through. I did not beg him to stay after that. That's how my 5.5 years of toxic dependency came to an end. I was in a long-distance relationship and I had this sinking feeling in my stomach whenever the thought of moving came up. Then one day I had a job interview in the city he lived in, which also happened to be a city I had a lot of friends in. After the job interview I hung out with my friends and had a blast, but the sinking feeling didn't go away. I eventually realized I wasn't afraid of moving to the city he lived in. I was afraid of living with him. He was the kind of guy who was into an ambitious woman in theory, but also wanted her to do all of the cooking, cleaning, etc. I realized that eventually I would become his housewife because he wanted kids and definitely wasn't going to help much. That was not the future I wanted for myself. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.